Oh, we're live. Okay. What's up, guys? What's up? Welcome to Inside Traders. Hopefully, if you're in the markets today, you're surviving. And I must come to you shamefaced and sore afraid. Of course, I was looking forward to a decline like this, but I must admit my Delta program failed. My hedge, I've been talking about this on this show, that I've been waiting for a market decline to be able to really profit from a decline, which is like my current obsession. Is I don't want to just survive declines. I want declines to be where I can make an extra profit, because that is where you can accumulate a really good long position, is in declines. But you can't do that if you don't have money, and nobody has money in declines. And so the market dries up, margin flows out, and that is how it is. And so this is all coming from Mr. Powell's service towards our fine government, in stating that rates will stay long into next year. But of course, we know that that is part of a tale, and we don't really mind, because it'll switch one day in our favor after the right people position themselves. The Federal Reserve will have a reversal event, probably from a crisis, like a banking crisis or whatever. There is a certain part of what they're doing that is performative, in that they could just change things willy-nilly, but they don't, and they have their reasons, often with gerrymandered data. I don't know a better way to say it, manipulated, manicured data. And so that sword cuts both ways, though, because when something does break, that gives them the excuse they need to do a reversal. One criticism I've heard many people say of the Fed is why 2% interest rate? Why not 3? Well, first of all, as far as I've heard some experts claim, there is good data and even more reliable data that the real inflation rate is under 2%. But since AI is real, despite some haters that are willing to put their heads out there, they're going to get their heads fucking chopped off, because AI is super real. Look, it made that bear. This bloody bear I was talking about. And that is why I'm shamefaced and so afraid, because I talked about this on the last show, on how this was going to happen. Not only is it going to happen, it's going to keep happening into next week, probably. I mean, it's either going to rally Monday, and that's going to be the relief rally. I think more likely it's a couple of more days, and because it's got to have a big push down. Now, SPY is at core critical levels. ARC broke through its resistance. That is happening makes me think that it could be a longer term bear run. This is what you just don't know. It is impossible to know. It is completely possible for Apple to go to 150. Not only is it possible, it's kind of inevitable. Now, I don't know when that's going to happen or why, but I think of it as a phenomena of buyers, because you just don't know who holds at what levels and when they're going to sell. And so you really have to be approaching things from the consideration that the price can double or fall in half at any moment, the price can double or fall in half, which is why I've been trying to build this program, which failed. But it failed for two reasons. Well, a lot of reasons it failed. But the main contributors, the number one reason is it was my third time ever attempting it. So that'll be worth noting. But as I get more information and iterations, I will be able to account for more things. And it didn't fail technically. We can look at the code real quick. First, I got to just show you guys Tesla. Because like this is it. This is what you're waiting for, a clear trend. You're waiting for a trend. The whole point to be in markets is to spot a day where one thing is purchased and it never changes. Okay, that's not really today. Today was kind of bullish and mixed. But then it ended, yeah, I do think into next week. So here's the thing with options. They gap every day, they gap. And so they're either gapping up or they're gapping down. And if you can position yourself on the right side of that gap, it's glorious. I think that these players, and I've talked about this on the show, are positioning themselves for that gap basically every day. And I think they're making hundreds of billions of dollars worldwide in terms of like the market manipulation. And so there's nothing of value in it other than like it's a artifact of our current like trading or not trading, our current markets. And so to me, that just means that like the equity markets like they exist today will not exist today for long. And these guys are fucking pumping out crazy amounts of premium at the cost of retailers. And so we want to do that too. We want to be able to pump out the premium while we can. It's like an extraction because it can't always be this way. It cannot always be this way. Like eventually it'll be Star Trek and we're going to have a credit system because we have replicators. And that begins with Optimus. And if you don't know, Optimus is a robot that Elon Musk is making, and it's going to do everything, and it's going to be really cool. And with that, oh, I don't have it queued up. Hold on. And with that, YouTube royalty free music. Let's see what we got. Hold on 1 second. Like, this is my show. I gotta have fun with it, right? If I'm not having fun, it can't work. Okay, that's good enough. I don't know, I kind of like the music. Where am I? Pause. So, tape. Oh, this is tape. So, yeah. What are we talking about? So, like, until we get to the AI infinite economy, which is like powered by Optimus robots being built by Mr. Musk, who sounds like kind of a dick to work with, to be honest. Although I'd love to work there, officially, Tesla application, this is it. Like it'd be a joy to work at any of his companies because they're changing things in a major way. And they are part of something that's unique and valuable. And so that's always attracts like a certain type of person. And anyway, like for real, like that's my job application. If somebody from Tesla sees this, I know shit and I can use it to make you money is my pitch on a job. And I'll do things I don't want to do for that. There you go. That's the pull of it. But yeah, like it's such a clear trend today. Like that's a clear trend. That's a clear trend. You see this many puts, you start buying puts. It's not mixed action. You switch to calls. I mean, it's all mixed. So it's not like it's easy. Nothing's easy, but it would be nice to get a fucking win. No, it'd be nice to do what these guys are doing, which is like be on the right side of the trade every freaking time, which is why I'm very pleased to introduce the 0.03 version of Delta Hedge to you. That was anticlimactic there. So here's how it works. Like it monitors any option contract I have. and it aggregates all of the contracts in a given expiry period into one delta sum. And I just use the Polygon API to get the Greeks, but I think I can calculate them myself at some point. In fact, I think I can get better and more real-time data by calculating it myself through the actual trades. What I need to know is how reliable is the trades data. I need to be able to like get a socket connection, which I have, but I just don't know what to compare it to. That gives me a live stream, literally, of all of the trades as they're happening. And in that, I should be able to infer my own price with my own kind of like strategy, conservative, aggressive, neutral, like environmental. Everything can be considered in this stuff, right? So what you just want to consider everything you can. And so you get like technicals and macro, and you plug it all into the algorithm, and its purpose, although, like whether or not it can actually do it, I do believe these things are possible to build. Its purpose is to give you the best price for your intention, because people have different pricing rules. So you can see this in the order flow. When you see sweep here, that's like somebody just saying, fuck, give it to me right now. I need it right now. I'll pay anything. That is a desperation is what a sweep is. But like, it's for a good reason. Like, what are you desperate for when you're dying of thirst or your house is on fire? Yeah, like water, for sure. And that's what puts do. Now, how do you actually buy a put? Nobody wants to buy a put. That's like the worst job in the universe, to be a put buyer. I wouldn't want to do that. Shit. Buy a put? No chance. I'm not going to. I refuse to. And so I am going to build a system that puts my puts for me. I am building a put that puts itself. And I got the idea from talking to ChatGPT. And it's, I believe, a real thing that people do manually, which seems crazy to me because there's no way you could do it manually. It is impossible. Like, in order for it to have any amount of success, it needs to have speed and accuracy above all else. Yes. If it doesn't have speed and accuracy, it can't compete in the real markets. So, like, it can't be a manual thing. It needs to be 100% automated. Even then, it has to have like fail safes. This is one thing I've really thought that it needs. It needs, in order for it to be truly a put that puts itself, it needs a dead man switch to a backup server or a cluster of distributed backups, all of which are running their own version of Delta Hedge that is pretty easy to set up in AWS or GCP or whatever. I could figure it out. Modern technology, everything is just APIs, which is awesome. And so, so you have like this backup service running, and if it doesn't get a ping, right, this would happen all the time until you work out the bugs, which is why it's awesome. Like, you got to fail first. You got to fail first so you can fail forward. And the only way to fail forward is to learn everything. You got to learn everything. That's how it goes. And then if you understand everything, you can begin to just navigate the landscape to your advantage. Everything becomes your advantage if you actually have adapted. And so that's something I'm interested to do on the show, is like adapt to the market perfectly, obviously, as best I can adapt. So with the idea of a put that puts itself, came from talking to GDT, Gamma Delta Theta, my LLM, and it's part of this trading psychology in human behavior where, like, you don't want to buy when it's low. You want to buy when it's high, and that's when people do buy. And it comes back to this Warren Buffett statement that you should be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. Until that's not true. Like there's no one, thing, because for sure, like if you were greedy today and you bought a bunch of calls like this guy, he can get totally nuked on that call. Down, like again, you got to keep in mind with calls, they gap. Basically every day they gap. And so they're either gapping in your favor or against your favor. That's why you have calls both ways. And so what's good about my system is it did actually work. It did work. Problems, many problems. Like, first of all, I still have my behavior, which is like to undo the hedges. And that is its own kind of interesting thing, because you kind of want to, you want to undo the hedges because that's real profit. Now, when you do that, the equity is being removed from your account. And so you have to be a little bit like careful in that regard. But like in theory, not in theory, like in reality, you are like locking in a gain, but it is removing equity. But you're taking risk off the table. Now, the risk that you're taking off the table might be the right side risk for the next session or whatever. So like it's pretty complicated stuff and it's not easy. But like in theory, all this stuff should be possible. And I'm going to keep trying until I can tell you why I found out it is impossible. But we're not there yet. I still believe it is totally possible, even more so than ever. And why do I think that? It's because this delta hedging really works. So let me show you how it works. Now, the principle. Mine doesn't work. Just the concept is sound. Like one of my ideas when I was like kind of resisting attacking this project was I didn't think that delta would change as much as it does. It changes quite a lot over the course of a session. So this is just a snapshot, and you can see hedge order created, and that price would get rejected. See, it's all these little things, right? You got to like, this is due to a rounding error in the way that like JavaScript handles floats. Like 12 people fucking know what that means, but they'll be impressed. So it was worth saying. But for real, like the delta moves a lot. And so what I was concerned with is I wouldn't have a system that could react to market changes. This system reacts to market changes at the right time. It's great. And you can just like see it. So if we looked at a timestamp, I guess I don't have any, but like I just can observe from like seeing it work that we could actually pull it up in emails, but it's for sure not perfect, which is what's so exciting, is it's basically for free. And so here's why I think delta hedging works so well. I think it's because the options market and the equity market basically are different. Okay, so that's the first thing to keep in mind. Now, the price of every option is set by the equity, so the correlation is like 80% or really high, but that's what you're expecting when you're buying an option. Is that is very like correlated with the underlying, but they're separate markets. And the option price I have found as set by volatility, which now I believe must be set by, I want to say popularity, but like interest volume. There's like an index metric that has not much to do, I think, with either side of the trade, and just has everything to do with how much activity is happening on that chain. And I think that's what drives up volatility. And that volatility is like the water. And so like, it's kind of like there's, without any volatility, that I believe means there's not a lot of market participants in that chain, is how I've come to think of it. And I don't know yet because I have to still talk to experts or whatever. Some of this stuff I don't think many people like have a good way of explaining, besides using a bunch of technical jargon, but it's all pretty comprehensible when you crack it open and start taking things apart. And And so, right, because it has to be, it has to, right, because it works. It's a real thing, like that does work. And and so, like I said, the story of Delta Hedge is one day I was talking to GDT and telling him my woes about how he can't buy puts, and somehow, or just like I hate the cost of insurance. And so through that dialogue, I guess hit on the idea of a dynamic hedge. But how do you hedge? You can hedge by price, obviously, and that actually might even be a more effective short-term solution. But if you're trying to build like the real system, then I think the reason why delta hedging works so well is because it's not the equity market, it's the options market. Like I said, they diverge. The correlation isn't one-to-one by any means. And that's kind of why I was telling you about like how I believe implied volatility works. It doesn't work like how it naturally seems or whatever. It's kind of like, speaking of coding or whatever, like async and sync are kind of like, it makes sense, but not really. It's not intuitive at all. And so that's how a lot of things with option pricing are. It's not very intuitive at all. But the way that I've come to think of this stuff is just, by the way, is like without having the in volatility, you're kind of like, your boat is kind of like stuck on the rock. The tide comes in, all the ships are lifted up. But I think the tide goes out if people don't participate in the markets or something. I don't know. Still need to talk to people and figure that out. But anyway, a lot of the pricing is not intuitive, so I wasn't really expecting delta to be that reactive, but it's pretty freaking reactive. And so this right here is a call gap. Now I can have a put gap as well, but that's not how I'm going to do the next iteration of the system. So in this iteration of the system, the idea was, okay, I have a bunch of calls that are languishing and I don't want to sell because that creates a real loss. And that realizes the loss. And something, man, you got to be so important about is realizing losses. Big difference between a realized and an unrealized gain. Big difference. And loss. And so you got to like treat your gains as vaporous and your losses as permanent. And really just not ever consider you should, like, in theory, I mean, right, this is what a business would do. I'm like trying to build a portfolio like it was a company or whatever. And one of the things you would do is loss prevention. So like when you go to place an order, you by default maybe don't place it and require it to be done like through the actual website, through the interface. Maybe give me a link for that or something. But if it would create a loss. And so by default, the system can only generate credits or gains, I think is a good rule, a good like first principle or whatever. And that's because losses really change things. Anyway, so if you can never take a loss, if you can only exit like from, like whatever, positions with returns, you're golden. Like you can work forever or whatever. It doesn't really I'm talking about like using margin. The only things I'm interested is margin and options, but they're very complicated, not very intuitive. And it is fire. This is fire. Like margin and options is Prometheus handing the tools of the gods to man for real. Because it will light up your home and that might burn it down. And lately I've just been getting burned. And so because I've been getting burned so hard, I've been trying to develop this idea and this system that can take equity that I don't want to realize a loss on. That's the important part. And also, the real reason I want this system is so that I can compete with these guys. And let me just adjust this Stream Deck. New action. I got to do it. I got to do it. I know it's not entertaining or whatever, but I just got to be able to do this. Uh, flow scene. We want this to be code scene. Activate. Nice. Okay, so now I have it on my buttons. Code scene. Nice. So yeah, like I've been wanting to like, so first of all, not only can I not buy puts, I won't buy puts, but like even if I could buy puts, even if I could, I can't do it in time. I'm like gonna fumble through like typing in the order. No, that's not like it needs to react in real time. Oh, this is why Delta is so awesome. Okay, so now we're getting into it, right? Finally. Delta is calculated per symbol per chain, which you can see somewhere here. Okay, so we have the arc September. Anyway, whatever. These are like obfuscated numbers. They're not real. Okay, just anyway, I mean, some of these contracts are like pretty crazy. But anyway, the point is you get the total delta, you get the exposure per chain, and you have that be the unit that you fix to. Now, why does that matter? As I show you how all my troops are aligned or whatever. Why does that matter? It matters because I think it's more reactive than the market, because often I'll see stuff happening in the options chain in terms of like price volume. Like I'll see like a ton of volume in a socket connection that's monitoring the trade volume of a given price. So it can just be like click, 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 click. But then sometimes it's like, and it's just like rows. And so like something's happening, right? Something's happening when that happens. And that's a signal. And so like all of this stuff you can eventually pipe in and combine together to create, I think, really accurate and reliable, and most importantly, real-time indicators that a system can use to make decisions. And if you had that, if you had like a tech kit in an arsenal and you like had a weapon and it was like a put that puts itself, that's a pretty freaking good weapon. If we're in a VR game or something, that's a pretty good weapon. And it should be possible to build. And I think people probably have built it. But I doubt many people actually have built it, because who could have built it before me? I don't know. It would have had to be in the last decade, maybe 20 years, like, so nobody in time in history could have ever even tried until option markets existed. And then probably until modern APIs could make it pretty easy. Maybe you get like hedge funds and people that are like paid to develop it. But like as far as individual people that have ever tried to delta hedge, I don't know. There might not be a ton. In fact, I'd say there couldn't be more than a couple of million, because it's only been possible for a couple of years in practical terms. So there just hasn't been enough time to test it. So I think it works, and I think it's a freaking great idea. And the reason it will work in the longest of terms when the kinks are removed is because it's going to be more reactive than equity markets. I think most of the time it's going to be more reactive. And so that is going to allow me to have another arbitrage in theory, which is like kind of the thing on the show, is like I want to be arbitraging everything I can and just like exploit that arbitrage for no reason other than people farm on a video game. It's just like fun to do, but it's dangerous and hard. And so I do love farming though. I'm a farmer. And that's not like the best practice, but I think if you're farming using tools that you custom designed and built, you're doing a different kind of farming. So in theory, we should be farming, in a way that the farm runs itself. and we're like automating a farm. And so it's not quite the same as just like being a real farmer. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want to build systems. So anyway, index call delta is, so yeah, it's more reactive than the equity markets. The option markets are more reactive. And so like it's even better real time. Oh yeah. And so the reason that matters is I tell you all my secret. Hey, like this is, I am learning out loud. That's the point of the show. I'm not claiming to know or be an expert. I'm just claiming to be on an adventure and happy for anyone to like join me on that adventure in terms of figuring this out, which I see as a fun opportunity that is available for the first time ever. And I'll tell you, it's freaking fun. Like it's going to put Vegas to ruin if I get my full vision realized, which is like I'm plugging a bunch of stuff, not just this, but into these stream decks. And I have my own idea for like a custom controller or whatever. Like you want a market controller, basically. Accelerate, decelerate, that kind of stuff. And you need a whole display on how to visualize where everything is and all the time. And so there's so much data and it all needs to be piped in and like stored and managed. And there's so much to do. But I think it'll be a fun thing to build, and I'm going to build it live on this YouTube. If you want to actually see some of the coding sessions, sometimes if I have some extra time, I do try to do those live. And I think that is useful because it kind of shows people how I work with AI, which I don't think people are taking advantage of because it's basically is transformative, and there is no way it's not going to be in the fullness of time bigger than the iPhone, like in terms of revolutions in technology. That's not possible for it to be smaller. And the iPhone changed the world. It changed all of our lives irrevocably. And we only just don't know because it's so freaking convenient. And that happened like a decade ago or whatever. And so that is eventually how it's going to be when you have, and like, I love this concept. I think it's from Fahrenheit 451, which maybe Ray Bradbury, not totally sure actually, where you have these seashells and they're kind of like these like antennas, and they're earwigs. They're, I mean, that's what I call them. They're AirPods. And they're these little white things, and they just sit in your ear, and all day long there's something being piped into it. And that way nobody ever had to think, I believe was his take on it. But you see similar things in 1984 with like those TV boxes that are always on, which is kind of funny because that was connected to an early Apple advertisement about like being a disruptor. But if you ask me, Apple's still a disruptor. At least if your name is Zuckerberg, ends in Zuckerberg, you're getting disrupted. Like, I love that they built, so many tangents. I love that they built that wearable VR headset, like right after the Oculus. Oh my God. Because Facebook they need a moat. So backing out all the levels of those tangents, what about Apple, iPhone changed the world, AI changed the world? You guys can see my show. And if you go to caleb.tube, go to my playlists, you'll see one called Office Hours. And I use AI all the time. Like, in fact, I'll just show you right now since I spent so much time talking about it. GDT. Let's show them what's up. So this is what? Oh yeah, I'll do this pretty often where like I will give him some existing code and then have him fix it. In this case, he like fixed the return of my overload, and then I'll just ask him follow-up questions. Like, yeah, I want people to be able, I'm people or whatever. I'll just describe to him what I want. I don't have to even know how it's built. Like I don't even have, like I'll get to know how it's built by using its code, but I don't have to know it to be able to describe what I want. And so like that's the key with AI. If you can make amazing things by just having taste and preferences, like you can express that endlessly. And we're just at the beginning of this generation of language models and AI art generators. And like all of that is going to be combined into a brain. And that brain is going to be on a level that is way beyond anything that any of us could have ever imagined, because we're already getting emergent properties today. So if emergence is happening with no time or investment, it's been maybe it's been 10 years, maybe it's been 20 years. No, I'd say it's been 10 years since AI was serious and like being used like every day in modern programming or whatever, like maybe 15, 20 years at the most, but I'd say 10 or maybe 12, but let's just say 10. And so you get all these different versions out, these different species of models that can do work, that can do real production and work. Like this is work. He fixed my code. I would have had to pay somebody to produce that. So I'm receiving a benefit. I'm receiving a gain. And that's an arbitrage. I am receiving a real, like assuming this unit of logic is valuable in terms of how I'm using it, because anyone could spend all day on building a button that like accidentally, evaporates the atmosphere. So like that's what they almost did in Oppenheimer. I mean, in the Manhattan Project, which was revealed to me in Oppenheimer, which I really had no idea of, which was that that's a freaking amazing story, actually. Such a good movie. And something that, what was revealed in Oppenheimer? Oh yeah, that they didn't actually know that that it wouldn't cause a chain reaction that would light the atmosphere on fire or whatever. Basically, that it wouldn't create a uncontrollable chain reaction that would then like destroy the world. They couldn't prove it. Now, because that's a little bit how stats work, and zero is like not, it's a very natural concept actually, but it's not like a real thing. Zero doesn't really exist. I mean, it exists, but like it not really. Like what in nature is zero? The center of a black hole, but that's also infinity. And so like it's an abstract that we use to package something we don't understand, which means higher mathematics are yet to be discovered. So a lot of work for people to get out there and start thinking about. Yeah, like what was I telling you? Oppenheimer set the world on fire. They didn't actually know if the experiment would whatever. Well, I mean, that's just kind of how I think of AI. It is like this fire that is going to change the world, and that code to me is useful. And guess what? I would say this is worth $20 in terms of speed and execution. It wouldn't be $20 if I had to go and like find a guy and like work with them and blah, blah, no. In terms of just like, I need it, I got it, I want it, I got it. That is, I'd say $20 of value right there. And so like now, I, again, could be using that value to build a tool that lights the atmosphere on fire and sets off a chain reaction that destroys my portfolio. I don't think I'm going to do that. Another one. So I had this function called UUID. It just gives me a random ID. And he wrote it. I didn't even know how it works. Like, what is this? Replace? It's a bunch of bullshit. Whatever. I don't need to know how it works. I know that it creates the output that I want. I know that the code is deterministic. I know that if it creates the output I want from the input 100% of the time, then it's a reliable unit of logic at its task, and it can be composed in other units. And if I was really scared, I could write a test, but TypeScript is pretty much enough for me in terms of like maintainability. But the AI should be writing unit tests. Anyway, point is, I just wanted to be able to like prefix this and change like the first couple of letters from random to defined. And so yeah, like I'll just paste this code in, boom, works on the first try. Like let's see another one, force fill. That's a pretty good one. Deep bounds versus throttle. Yeah, like these things, create a pivot table. Anyway, delta hedge. What's this? Geez, that worked first try. I find that you actually get better results from these LLMs if you kind of give them an identity and then talk to them in that, and then like don't break character. Yeah, like it's a character. Just pretend like it's a real person. I think you get better results. What is this? Oh yeah, this was cool. Like, see, here's stuff that it gives you unlimited value. Unlimited value. Why? I learned from it. I didn't know that this was possible to be able to. Let's go this. Okay, so like this npm config symbol lets you pass in Tesla. Dude, Tesla got put so hard today. We'll look at it. I already showed you. Such a good day for the system, but it wasn't my day. So like, hopefully it's like hopefully we don't run out of days before it's my day, right? But no, for real, like it gives you a way to pass in a symbol, and that makes npm run infinitely extensible. Basically, if you don't know, like it just makes it easier. It makes everything easier. So like, not only did it make my work easier, it did it in a way that taught me something passively. And then people are going to say that it's not a revolution, or like there isn't emergence, is crazy. It's a new thing for sure. You can see it right here. This is evidence that it's a new thing. It's indisputable evidence. Dispute this evidence. I learned something and it did work for me. That work is of basically infinite value because I genuinely learned that there was something else that was possible and a convenient way to do it. And then, but let's just call that $20. And then it did a little bit of writing of code for me. Let's call that like $1. So $21 of value. So we're at $40 of value extracted that I would have had to pay somebody, because now I don't have to pay. So like, by the way, half the reason why this delta hedge doesn't work is because I keep buying back my calls. Like I should just let those calls sit, but then you have all this risk. Anyway, this is why we need the system. Now, I don't know exactly how the system's going to solve my behavior, but I think it'll definitely help. And so where were we? I was just telling you about AI and how I use it on my show. You can check it out if you're interested. And just like, this is it. This is how I use it. Like, and it's a Q&A, it's a back and forth, it's a dialogue. And what's created is real value. And that's what makes it different than anything that came before, and why it will be a transformative revolution. In my idea, in my thinking, like to say it's a novelty is to say, I don't know enough about it and I've never actually used it, but I'm going to make this statement knowing nothing. And otherwise they would be able to say exactly how it's a novelty and why, and they would be able to explain how it can do things that the authors never intended and provide actual value in the real world, like make a beautiful image or a nice line of functional code that teaches the programmer in a single stroke. Like, explain that to me in a way that makes those things not have value. Not possible. But I'd love to hear it. So like, leave a comment and then like and subscribe, of course. So yeah, like, see, but here's the thing. The system is so simple. Okay, so like all these puts coming in, I'd be ahead of any of these guys. Assuming I didn't buy it back, I'm going to have to find a way not to buy it back. Maybe just like I'll learn. I don't know. Like, doesn't seem possible. And so for me not to buy it back, I'm going to buy it back every time. And that's why actually the real evolution came yesterday. And yesterday, this is real-time shit we're doing. And I haven't been able to test this yet. Today would have been a great day to test it. But so one of the problems with the V1 through V3, one of the recurrent problems has been I keep like locking myself like in a way where like I'm getting the worst side of every trade. It's hard to explain technically why, but suffice it to say, like, if the system had a better way to determine when to buy, that would be happening much less, because the best insurance is the one you never need, which is why Delta Hedge is so awesome. Because it's a put that puts itself is dynamic and doesn't yeah, like it needs to be completely autonomous. Like, that's what I was talking about with like having backup services, because your Delta Hedge could have a bug and it could fail, it could have a script. And so like you have like N backup services that are all getting pinged within 5 minutes of market hours. I mean, 1 minute, that seems like a lot. That's like a lot can change in markets in a minute. And so why not just have it be 1 minute? If that happens, then it immediately exits all trades that it can at a profit and just like sells to cash. Boom, just exits. And that'd be a pretty cool save switch, because the thing that would make Delta Hedge so cool is it would allow you to take unlimited risk, because it would manage all the risk for you and it would do it mathematically, provably. I believe that is technically possible to build. Like, so this first version, it worked pretty good. I mean, here's the thing, like in any other, if it was a dip situation, it would have been worked perfectly. The reason it kind of didn't work is because I keep buying back the calls for a profit, which is the same as just buying calls to begin with, buying naked calls to begin with. There is literally no difference. It's the same as like just basically doubling down. And so it isn't, but I don't like having all this sold call risk, especially when those sold calls are like high units, low dollars, because when those move, they explode. And so those are like little bombs waiting to happen, right? Like, and I know that. And so one thing is the system already doesn't buy those contracts now. So like it finds contracts on the chain that are like, with different price thresholds or whatever. But yeah, like what it does at its most basic level is it just tells all my long delta to go ahead and stay fucking put. That's what I want you to do today. Stay put. And it does that every day. It does it every day. But the big question is where do I stay put from? Because that determines quite a lot, obviously, is your index. Like what you're indexing from has got to be the right index. And so one of the problems I've had with my first few attempts on running this program is it was like a little too sensitive. Now, it wouldn't have been too sensitive if it was like catching the beginning of like a long decline or whatever, then it would be perfect. But the problem is that it would get a bug, the script would halt, I'd need to restart the service, I'd need to like go and use a restroom, and so I had to hit pause or whatever. Like there's a lot currently that can stop it from being reliable. And so it's not even close to any of that, to any of like the full thing that should be possible with like the backup services and stuff. But yeah, like why? Well, I guess I lost that thread a little bit. I'm just telling you about Delta Hedge and why this early version needs some work. So yeah, like it would sell these calls at the right time. It's just a little too reactive. But the big problem is, like I said, what do you set the index to? And that has got to be, I think there is no better one. This is my favorite one. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's fucking perfect. The index is always the previous day's close. And then here's what I don't know. Like, you can kind of lock yourself in the box a little bit, but like not really with Delta Hedge, because it is only activated when it needs to be. So what that means is if you, first of all, have it, and these days happen all the time in markets, just like the opposite day happens all the time. They both happen all the time. If you have a day where you gap up on a given stock, all of those call options and put options would gap in their respective directions as well, but like way more. In fact, I just think options gap every day, basically. There's just an open and close price, and it's always like pretty different. Which is like why when you're holding options for like a long period of time, it can be like really good or really bad, but it could be really freaking neutral with Delta Hedge. And so the reason that's so imagine that you gap up. Now, what about in the short direction? I don't even want to think about it. I'm only building this for me. I only care about like protecting the downside. This could work just as well for shorts. And I might be interested to explore that in the future, is how do you protect your short interest? It's just the reverse. And so it would be very easy to just like turn a knob and have it also work for shorts. So I might try that if I actually get it working. But like technically, I still haven't found a reason why it shouldn't be possible. In fact, my testing has only revealed that not only is it possible, it's entirely practical, and it's because it's such a good representation. Like the delta is perfect. It's a perfect metric. I can explain why in other ways later. Just one real quick. Like if you buy a delta of 99, the system does nothing ever. Like if you have a contract that's deep in the money, the call gap that's created is never going to be significant. It's never going to be 0.19. That's like a huge call gap. That means there was a big change in price. This kind of a number would never happen with a deep in the money. Like let's say at 50% of the current price, that's where your strike is. It's like your delta would be 99.9. And for every session of every day, no matter what, it would always be 99.9. So what does that mean? Well, that means now let's assume in this magical fairyland scenario that the system is accurate and reliable. And requires no maintenance or anything. It's just like, it's there. It's just like this insurance system that you got. And then, well, what's so good about it is it only activates when it has to. And that works in your favor in so many scenarios when it comes to delta, because it's not the same as price. The price, that's why it works so well. Delta works so well because the price can change and the value of the delta can stay fixed. And when the value of the delta changes, that's when you're really should pay attention. Like price can oscillate as Brownian motion or whatever. Not really. It's all very technical and logical and algorithmic. But still, it is random. But in that random variance, I don't know, what do you fix the call gap to? To me, it's so perfect to like find at least an index. Then we have the threshold problem, but let's just solve the index problem to begin with. The index problem is solved by calculating, which I forgot to do today. I mean, see, the system has a long way to go. We're going to do it live right here with you guys. Terminal window, integrated. Do I get a terminal window? Let's see. Terminal. npm run, or actually no, it would be ts node source domains portfolio trading, then option, no, utils, and shit, I guess I can't do it. I don't remember how. Where the freak is it? Oh no, it's in the hedge utils. Okay, here's where it is. Await, load deltas, index chain. I'm just like, if there was a bunch of people and I had feedback live, I probably wouldn't be doing this, but no, I've got to save it. Shit. All right. Well, yeah, no, I spent too much time on that, and it's probably revealed too much, but that is how like my system works. Is very manual right now, and I would like for it to be automatic. Let's go back to the intro since I'm in rant mode. I would like it to be more like, wow. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to bear with me as I adjust my hat and hair. I would like it to be more automatic, and that is the key in the longest of terms, is to make it automatic. And yeah, but it is a very manual process right now that takes a ton of configuration and maintenance. And it's not complete at all. So delta hedging works because, I mean, in theory, can be done because it aggregates all the contracts on any expiry period, and it does that for every position that you have per symbol and per company. And so now, like, if you are aggregating that, you don't really care which contract is moving or why. You just care about the index falling below a threshold. That's all I'm talking as delta hedge. Like, that's the only thing you care about is like, I just protect the delta. Like, I don't give a fuck what else is happening. If the delta drops below the index, then it shall be secured and continuously. So this brings me back to like why the first couple of tries haven't worked so well. And it's mostly, I think, because I haven't had a good index. I would use the index of when I started the program, like, or just when I would activate the program, I would just take the first read as the index, not a good index, because it ends up firing too many of the calls or whatever. And so it's too easy to get locked in and lose equity that way. But like, here's the cool thing about delta hedge is if it was not like a real crash or whatever, if it was just a little bit of a down and then an up, the system would, like, I mean, you can kind of nuke yourself, like, if it is too aggressive. So you got to have some rules. Like, the safe thing about my current version is it only creates credits. This version, I think I do need to create a debit, which is pretty freaking crazy, but I think I have to. And do I have to? Maybe I don't have to. Maybe just setting it by the index will be enough. But I think I need to at least buy a partial debit. Yeah. Like 20%. I'll start with 20%, but it's still scary to make a debit automatically. Because I don't know. I mean, they're both scary, right? Like you can add a risk through a credit and a debit just as easy. So it shouldn't be that any more scary. Actually, it's a misunderstanding of the risk to think it's more scary. Is it the facts? So like, but I can just see so easily how it could go wrong is you basically have some kind of like flash crash, massive event that takes down the market for like, I don't know, 2 minutes. Could that really happen? I think that there's a lot of safeties and protections that make that not happen. Because what the system would do is it would just sell 100% of your equity into puts that would then roast that chain. But even then, you'd have some value. You're going to have extrinsic value in the puts. So you can't go to zero. That's what I'm talking about with zero. It's like zero is not real, but like really small numbers, very real. And you can make a big number of a very small number with a bug in a automated program that is going to introduce inverse equity into your actual stock position. So like that's why this is playing with fire for sure. But again, like we ride pillars of fire. It is such a good way to phrase it that I've heard people say on to outer space on rocket ships. So what do? We take a large skyscraper and we build a bomb that only shoots in one direction, and then we blast shit into outer space with it, like the James Webb Space Telescope with insane precision. We just shot an asteroid the other day just to see what would happen. Turns out they're not made of much. They're mostly like loose, gravel or whatever. I thought asteroids were like boulders. No, they're just like coalesced gravel. Kind of like, I don't know, not as cool. But it is what it is. And so, yeah, so we are getting the delta per chain, and that's changing basically every day. But what we index it to is the previous day's close. That's what I've been trying to test. That's what I've been wanting to test. And the reason that seems like such a good idea to me is because if you're indexed to the previous day's close, first of all, it doesn't matter when you start and stop the script. You can start and stop it, add hedges. I mean, that then would need to like any new activity on a chain would need to be accounted for in that session. So like there you would use the initial read, but in that you just set the index. And so if there is no index, the opening one is the index. And then the next day it looks at the previous day's close. And all it does is it protects your whatever side you want, long or short, doesn't matter. But in my case, it's the long side. And what it does that by, this is, so like these thresholds are really going to matter and be important. I'm not totally sure on even where to begin with them. Like one important question I just don't even know how to begin to answer is like when, okay, so you have your index, it's below the index, guaranteed to happen. Do you activate right away? Do you wait for a threshold? If so, what threshold? So then I think that comes from automatically selecting the ideal and improving this logic over time, hedge contracts. And so you would just set some rules and then start walking through the chain. And you'd be like, do I own this? Yes, no, no. Is it high volume, like compared to the rest of the chain? Like, does it have some minimum volume or whatever? And whatever, you just go along and you find a contract that is, within some unit that makes sense. Maybe you actually do use price and you say the sum of all the equity on the chain, you just want to hedge it at 5% at a time. And then you find a contract within, 20% of that, and then whatever other parameters you care about to filter. And okay, so now you got your contract. What does that give you? A delta. And then that is what you're going to use to delta hedge. You're going to, anytime your index falls below 1 unit of that delta, then I think this is going to be the upgrade, but I'll try it. Currently, all I do is sell a call equal to the gap of the index and what? I can't even remember the way I used to do it because I recoded it all to be based off this previous day's close, which I wasn't able to test today. So I don't know if it works, but I think it's going to work way better. And like I said, like I was just indexing off when I started the script. That's not really any kind of a good index. Why it's awesome to index off your previous day's close and why I have to remember to record it. Although I guess I have till Monday, so I'll remember. Is because that makes it so that what I said a minute ago isn't exactly true, which is like if you just gap up and the stock keeps going up, Delta Hedge does nothing. If you own a contract that's deep in the money, Delta Hedge does nothing. Like even if the price goes down 5% in a day and you own a deep in the money contract, Delta Hedge does nothing. So it makes it properly reactive to use delta instead of price. Like with price, it's anyone's guess, like what do you hedge from? I don't know. But like with delta, if you have a deep in the money contract that has a call gap, like you're FUD. Like that means that something really shook that chain. And so, yeah, you need to hedge. And so what better way to hedge than in a way that it can be guaranteed to execute? Okay. None. So we sell a credit is the direction of the hedge must always be to create a credit. It has to. And so it can always execute. And so in the beginning, in my first few tries, I was just creating these credits, which was cool. Like and honestly, had I just kept those original contracts from like 2 or 3 days ago, I'd be way up on those. But it's not intuitive at all for me. I'm testing the system. So like, I don't want to it's all like real time anyway. But it also was buying up, like I said, I was buying a bunch of bombs. Like my contract selection logic was all off. It was selling like 60 contracts for like $2 each. That's what is that's a bomb. Like those things can explode to like 20 cents in a second. If the price goes up like 5%, like you're holding a bunch of little bombs. And so mostly I was just like clearing out the nukes. So in a way it's kind of good that like it's been going down while I've been like figuring that stuff out. But it hasn't added protection. It hasn't stopped declines at all. In fact, it hasn't exacerbated declines. Has it? No, because I made this sold call. That sold call artificially kept my equity at a level until I buy it back. Then that equity's gone because I take the risk off. So really what you want to do with a sold call truly is have it expire worthless, but that's pretty dangerous. Unless you have some way in the form I was doing it, because I was just selling calls like crazy. The system was like tons of calls, but that is because I didn't have a good index. But now I think I have a good index and a good threshold. And to me, the methodology is sound for both. We index off the previous day's close. We sell the contract that follows a couple of rules like volume and this and that as best we can. Okay, so now we have a trade that creates a credit. And what is it going to do? It's going to create this negative delta value that will then offset the loss of our positive delta value. Because, and again, right, I need to change this logic. I'm not quite sure what, but right now my current and index are set. When I'm measuring the delta, I'm taking my long minus my short to make it so that the program stops hedging if it doesn't have to, which is like kind of like the most important part of it, is that it only works when it has to. And it does that by balancing out the index. It does that by raising the value of the delta to its previous level, which is done through the short side. And right, because then minus a minus is a positive in math, in arithmetic, as I like to say. So we have a call delta and this all works for put delta. Any debit, it protects debits. And so so if you have a long put or a long call, we're going to sum up that and we're going to subtract any short positions to create the index. And then I still think I'm always going to do that, right? Well, let me just tell you, because the other side of this, and I don't know exactly how this is going to work in terms of like the index, and maybe I'll just have to stop protecting the put side for now. I'll just like only focus on the call side and leave the put side for later. Scenario, you sell a bunch of calls because the price dropped N% from the previous day. What do you buy those calls back with? I mean, yeah, you can use your own cash to do that, but what would be glorious is if you did like a pincer move, right? Like if you also bought a small put that was reactive enough, and it would be because it's at the same location around as the contract in the chain at the same expiry period, so it would be reacting about the same level as the calls. So like then you get this put, now that has a positive return of additional premium that you can use to buy back that call, because otherwise you're using margin or existing equity to buy back that call. And when you do that, you're going to lose the equity that the call was adding to your balance, which doesn't matter if the call's like at 10%, but you'll feel it at like 50%, but you might really should call that back or like realize those profits, because like that call will be the opposite. Like you'll have a double loss in the future by buying back a sold call. You're creating a loss and removing the equity, right? I believe that's how it works. And so sold calls are kind of tricky business. But yeah, so we sell the calls, and like I was just buying those back. Not a great idea. It is the same as buying a naked call. It's the same as doubling down. And so knowing that I'm a double downer and knowing that the system only activates when it has to, meaning the delta gap is present, it makes me inclined to take the additional risk of doubling up, because it won't fire as much then even. I actually think it's better, because then the first time it fires, it creates some padding at the top. And maybe what I find out is I should triple up. I don't know, actually. Could be. Especially if I get a reliable index of the previous day's close, because that really does make it so that things can only grow. That's freaking awesome, right? Because like if a contract is going down, down, down every day, first of all, in the normal world, in the non-delta gap world or whatever, or a non-delta hedge world, you don't even know about that. You don't know what contracts, you have no way to monitor all of that. Hey bud, here's my dog. You want to say hi to the camera? No? And so, yeah, say hi. There he is. Yeah, this is my dog. His name's Miko. What do you have to say? Are you going to tell us about your future political aspirations, Miko? Tell us. All right. So, yeah, that's my dog. He's a good dog. What was I saying? Oh yeah, like if you have Delta Hedge, okay, that's how dogs get locked up. They disrupt live streams. So yeah, like I basically think I want to take on the additional risk of just opening a credit spread technically where I sell a call and buy a put, and maybe I sell a couple units at a time. Maybe I experiment with selling two of those at a time, okay? Or even three or something, like multipliers. I experiment with multipliers. Because if we're going off the previous day's close and you just had a great run up, your delta hedge hasn't fired for like 3 or 4 days. So that's like amazing. So when it does fire, you kind of want it to fire like a good hedge, because that's going to be at the top of the market. Like the longer delta hedge goes without firing, which was not even really possible when I was creating the index from the script as I started it. It's really only possible that I can think of using some kind of moving average, but I like the close for now. That makes more sense to me. And so, yeah, like with the addition of the credit spread that sells a call and buys a put, that is going to give me, I think, like a lot more protection. And because, yeah, like it does protect, it's okay at that. First of all, it has to be running manually, and that is like its own thing. But I'm pretty sure I'll get it like running 24/7 soon enough. And so, yeah, when I, hi, hey, he's trying to be a part of things and you are distracting me. All right, I might have to lock him up. He's like, why are you talking to the camera when we could be running outside? That's what he's thinking. And so, yeah, trying to get back, where was I? Delta hedge, buying a put. Oh yeah, so like then you're selling to close instead of buying to close. Well, I mean, you're closing a credit spread, and I just think that's really going to change things. I think in two ways. One, the system is not protective enough. It isn't. In part because it sells the wrong calls and I have to buy those back. And so, but also I think it would probably have been protective enough had I started it at the very beginning. I don't know. It's really like against my nature to have these like really reactive sold calls, because I know like with a put, everything's known. With a sold call, things can go haywire instantly. They're very dangerous. Calls and puts are different in that way. And so like it's been risky to hold those, although it would have been the right thing to do to take that risk on. I mean, arguably, it's purely a behavioral problem, because if I'm thinking rationally, what do you really want is increasing gap exposure to the negative or to the opposite price direction. I've been closing out these positions daily or whatever, and kind of thinking of it a little bit as removing the risk and taking the gains. But in reality, it is the same as doubling down. And it's like, again, I just think there's going to be a big difference between a credit spread and a naked sold call. But it doesn't matter. Like, I either need to sell more calls, which I definitely don't want to do, or I need to buy puts because it's not protective enough. Given whether that's because of my behavior, the timing, or whatever, the system has to work in all conditions, and that includes my trading behavior, and it includes any market time or whatever. And so I think the next thing to test is basically when it's activated. And the reason I didn't build it initially this way is because I didn't want to have such a big hedge fired, because it's like, I don't know, the market could go up and then you're locked in the box or whatever. And so like, why didn't I build it this way to begin with? I think mostly because it's harder to do this. It's actually quite a bit harder. But it's done now and it's working, or I should say it's ready for its first test of being able to use the previous day's close as the index. And so that got it figured out. That what that solves is it will never misfire. So like when mine was running, my first version that was indexing based off the time I started the script, it just fires if the price is lower. So I would like turn it on and off depending on the price. Well, that means if I'm not paying attention, then I have just a bunch of like extra risk that I took on because I had a system or whatever. But which is like why obviously it has to run autonomous 24/7 on redundant services in order for it to actually work reliably. But yeah, like selling a call is so different than buying a put, because with a put, your downside is so limited. And with a call, like you could gap up out of that call, not notice it for a day or two, and it's down 300%. And so that, that's kind of different than what can happen with a put. A put can gain 300%, but only if it was, in the price direction that you wanted. So, yeah, he's like never vocal, but he's, why don't you tell us something? Tell us about your life, Miko. Yeah, nothing. And so these dogs, I feel like they know what we're saying, and yet they never talk to us. Like, what's going on? He's like, I don't have an articulable tongue, dude. Like, you can enunciate. Okay. It is pretty crazy. I feel like animals are smarter than we give them credit for. So anyway, we got I'm just on the bear. And it's a cool bear, AIR. I'd pay, I don't know, 20 cents, 30 cents for that picture. If like I had to pay somebody to do that, it's like worth like a nickel, maybe 50 cents. Kind of a cool photo. Like, look at this like saliva or like this gunk. Also, what is he? He's like marble, but real. It's kind of crazy. I like it. Delta hedging. Okay, so the next thing to try in this program is to buy a put. And I think that is going to make it a lot more protective. But also, the thing that I think makes all the difference is using the right index. Because like I said, the reason I didn't do the puts to begin with is because I didn't want it to misfire a bunch and then buy a bunch of puts, which I hate. I hate puts. So instead, the thing I'm going to experiment, even after just like thinking through this on the air, is actually doing a substantial, like maybe it does like I want to say like a 10% of the total position at once. Yeah, something like that. And then you just exit that, because you probably shouldn't be having your delta change that much. And if your delta is gapping down, that means you probably should hedge. Like, I don't know. I'll have to test it to know if it's too reactive. What's fun though is in the ultimate term, none of this matters at all, because I'm going to be able to secure my gaps from using contracts that are always Delta 99. Now, those are really hard to get. Those are like hard to get contracts. I've had them before though, and so like it's definitely possible. But I've also had those 99s go to like 50 in a second. Like, I mean like a full second. Like a full day or whatever. And so like a gap down. And then a long decline. And so 99 delta isn't a guarantee of anything. All it guarantees is that it is impossible for delta hedge to fire unless the delta drops. And once your delta enters 99, it never changes. So that's like a cool property options contracts that I think can be exploited to create a really efficient form of dynamic insurance. And I'm interested in exploring it because I think it will let me take on a little bit more risk. I mean, by a little bit, I mean a lot more, because I can't keep my hands off these contracts, and I'm not even going to try, right? I'm just going to freaking enjoy my time with these contracts. And how am I going to do it? By building a safe and reliable system that lets me take on this level of risk. So how would it work in this situation? Well, this is like a special version of Delta Hedge. And instead of running at the day level, it runs at the trade level. And so as soon as the trade, it basically just always sells out of the trade into the other trade. Anyway, I guess I don't have it fully figured, but I do know that it requires different logic. Like, it's not the same logic. But the idea here is the same thing, where like you start putting on these trades, and then if it immediately does a reversal within 100 milliseconds of that reversal, right now my system's like, I don't know, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that, maybe a minute. Not a big deal, because like it's aggregating across an entire chain. Like for a trade though, you need like way better precision. And I think you do that by, in the longest of terms, calculating all of your own indicators and pricing by the actual trade action, assuming that it can be, technically, like you can get all the trades. But yeah, so, so it has to be like 100 milliseconds. That has to be like way more real time because of the speed that these contracts change. Like I can show you in previous episodes, I've shown how like over the course of 1 minute, these contract prices can change like 20-30%. And so that's why the Delta Hedge has to work like so real time with these. But just imagine if I had my full vision realized, and there was, which I've only had for a couple of weeks, so it's not that possible for, I don't know why I'm like saying it realized, I'm literally thinking of it live with you guys right now. And so, but I can't figure out why like it shouldn't work, and it's going to let me play with these contracts, which I think is going to be like worth all of the effort, because it's going to be really fun. Because I can't really buy these in good conscience today, because I know I can't manage the risk. I know I can't. Like, it isn't possible for me. Nobody can. Like, they're too volatile. It's just not like it's gambling. It truly is gambling. But I don't think it will be gambling when I am monitoring their deltas in real time ideally, if I could have my way, I'd try to get it under sub like 100 milliseconds. Like every 10 milliseconds is like amazing. Like if you could get sub 50 milliseconds, and that means the entire loop. So from calculating the aggregate delta to looking up the current delta, which is like why in part we have to calculate it ourselves, so we don't have to do that lookup. But like, let's even say, no, you have to look it up. You have to get the freshest delta every time. And so you either have to calculate it or you have to do a lookup, and the lookup is expensive. But whatever, like a second, 5 seconds, even 30 seconds a minute is fine for regular option contracts. For these, it's gotta be probably under 500 milliseconds to a second. But I doubt you get a ton of value until you're like sub 100 milliseconds. Even that, I think sub 50 is like where you start to get real gains and really be competitive. But anyway, the idea, then all the rules are, and logic and everything is the exact same, except your index is just the opening delta. So what that lets you effectively say is like, this trade cannot lose money. It might not do anything. It might lose money because both contracts expire out of the money, and theta decay eats like the total trade because we just go totally sideways. But that's not really going to happen in, like the companies that are getting this level of flow. Like Tesla got so much premium. I mean, look at this put wall. It's crazy. So much premium. And on any of these companies, like something's going on with LI. What is LI? Anyway, I know what it is. I can't remember. But with this much options activity, you're going to be able to the price is going to move a lot. And so like, I doubt that sideways situation happens like a ton. But yeah, so like if you're buying whatever side, if the market goes against you within 100 milliseconds, you've already sold twice or 3 times a multiple of what you lost on the opposite side of the trade. Okay. So like, what if it keeps going down? First of all, it would have to go down, like you discount that from your buffer immediately, and you just cast that out so you don't even think about it. That's just like the buffer, literally. So you lose the buffer, and you now hedge from that point on every unit. Like there is no buffer. Like you're already in the hole at that point, and so now you're just delta hedging. And so, yeah, that should work. Right? Because like, if we're selling that contract, first of all, you might get like a really freaking good deal on that. Like, what if you had an alternate script and the price does go in your favor, and the contracts that you just, and the call you sold, like, goes to zero instantly, you buy it back, take that risk off the table, then the trade goes against you, but you still have the put because you didn't want to like realize the loss, and you knew that might happen. And so then now you have still something like some protection against the trade or whatever, but then also delta hedge would fire again because it's monitoring the, I don't know, would it fire? No. It's because it's monitoring that contract. So we're not hedging a chain, we're hedging a contract. So the index is the opening delta. That's the index. And you just make it permanently, that is the index. And so think of how freaking cool that is. The lower it goes, the more it's going to recover equity from that call. If the trade goes against you, boom, you just lost the whole trade. But like still, it's like not that crazy of a loss, especially if you had like, you bought more back in, especially if you were already exposed to the existing long position or short position that you were trading in. And so, yeah, like it gives you that sold and then the put. I don't know, man. Somebody tell me how it can't be built. I haven't built it, but like it should be able to be built. It should be technically possible to be done. And so at the trade level is actually more exciting. That's like more interesting because then you have a predetermined contract, and this is where the configuration is worth it. And it is getting a socket connection to the price, a dedicated socket connection to the price. And that makes execution time effectively 0. And, right? I mean, no, because you still got to calculate the Greeks or do the Greeks lookup. So execution time is sub 1 second. It's not bad. It's like 600 milliseconds, maybe 800, 400 if you're lucky. But maybe like 200 if you're really lucky. But yeah, you're not getting sub 100 with a network call. That's not going to happen. So anyway, but you line it up. So you get this contract, and now you got one of my market controllers, right? Talking about gambling. All of a sudden, it's not gambling. It's playing a game. It's gaming. It's not gambling. And here's how the game works. You got your delta hedge contract. When you think it's the right time, you hit a button to increase your exposure. When you think it's the wrong time or the time to harvest, you decrease your exposure. And throughout all of that, on the main contract, and throughout all of that, the system is protecting the contract from losses. It's not doing anything with gains. It's doing only things with losses. And so let's say you were right. You bought the bottom. It was perfect. Like that was the right time to deploy a put. That was the absolute top. Like you nailed it. Well, the system never fires once ever, because like that contract only gains in delta. It's never going to retrace past some threshold and you're golden. And so like that situation, if it's truly gambling, should happen 50-50, right? It should be 50% of the time. It's not gambling. It's highly manipulated. And there is a ton of other factors at work here. But in as much as it is gambling, it becomes much more of a game of skill when protected by the system that I'm talking about, which you can buy from me today. If you email me or like leave a comment, you can purchase an early version of everything I've talked about, and it's going to be freaking expensive. So like early adopters are going to get a great discount. Yeah, like I'm kind of serious about that. I'm not actually, I haven't done that, but I may make some of this technology available to people. If I find out that it works and is useful. I know it works though. It does work. Like I've seen it work. Like the concept of indexing from your delta and then hedging from that is not only sound, but more reasonable than anything else I can think of, including price. And price is like kind of the whole thing. So to find something more reliable and sensitive and accurate and timely than price is, I would say, a major discovery and a huge win. Now, what do I do with that is I think it's just not providing enough coverage. It's not ensuring my position. And there's two reasons for that. Actually, now that I think about it, there is only one main reason. The main reason that's happening, now that I really, really think about it. So what's funny is I might throw all that put logic out the door, right? I don't know if I will. Anyway, I just got to test. The main reason is it's only hedging my calls. It's not hedging my shares at all. Now, I do have my shares hedged somewhat through actual calls, but this comes back to why it's not enough to hedge your, it is not enough to hedge your shares with a sold call. It just depends on your cost basis. And this is why it's so freaking useful to think of your shares as virtual option contracts, where your cost average is your strike price, and then just set it expiring a couple of weeks out. I mean, it makes a major difference which week you choose. So whatever one, 4 weeks out, 2 to 4 weeks out with the highest volume is probably the only thing I can think. But anyway, you get your chain and you get your contract and you treat every block of 100 shares like a virtual contract. Well, you're going to have Uber insurance. It's going to be crazy, because here's how that would work. This is why it's so freaking genius to hedge with Delta. I didn't come up with the idea. GDT, literally. And so you get your shares represented as a virtual contract, which all of your tooling is already geared up to use. So it's perfect. In that way, it's a cost savings, and to hedge with shares in this way. So then, assuming, this is why it's so freaking good to use Delta, is I repeat myself, assuming that you have a deep in the money cost average, let's say those shares have a 50% return on them gain, right? that means your delta is never going to change on those shares ever, ever, ever. And you want to know why? It's because they don't have to. You've held that position to maturity, and it is giving you, I'm only in margin land. It is giving you a margin benefit, and it is like it's a position you only have to hedge if like the price drops like 8%, right? 8%. Whereas if you have a delta that's like right at the money, it's going to be moving a ton all over. And so the delta hedge is going to be way more active at the money than deep in the money, which is kind of like the whole point of the system in the longest of term. Like I've already told you, is I only really do want to hold 99 contracts in terms of like what I carry overnight. Everything else I want to sell at the beginning and end of the day or whatever. In part just because the overnight risk, unless I really think that the overnight is clear, like in this situation, I'd probably be pretty comfortable holding puts overnight. Like looking at this, maybe not a bad idea to expose yourself to the risk of gapping up with puts. Might be something to think about. And so, yeah, because that's a risk of its own, is the risk of gapping up with puts. And so, anyway, I've just been focused on this one system that it can actually just do all this stuff for me, so I don't have to think about it. Because at the end of the day, I don't really want to have to like be glued to my computer looking at a bunch of numbers. Like I don't think anybody does. I like doing it, but it's not kind of like the goal. What I think will be an incredible outcome and something that I would be thrilled to have is one, a product that is sellable and marketable. But two, I mean, that's two. One would be like a system that I can use to play the market the way that I want to play it, which can't, I don't think, be done in any other way. And so, like, if I want to use these contracts, I have to have some assistance. Like, I'm not fooling myself or anyone else. Nobody can manage the risk of these contracts. It's not possible. In as much as you attempt to, you are gambling. And you can get lucky gambling. But where it turns from a game of chance to a game of skill is when you introduce delta hedging. Now you at least have some chance of being kind of protected in your gamble, where if things go against you, you'll have some recovery. And it makes the gamble like, yeah, it's risky, but in the same way, like, I don't know, it's probably way less risky than roulette, right? Like, it's probably as risky as poker in that way. And then some people are really good at poker. And that's kind of how I think of it. It's cool that it's even possible. And why should we let these inside traders make all the premium? They are going to be like not contributing, like, anyway, there's an argument that we're all contributing to society, even traders. We're providing liquidity and information, but still, like, why should we let these guys in the suits have all the fun? We should figure out like how to take advantage ourselves. But if you're just a normal person, you're listening to this, I can tell you after like a couple of months of trying, it's basically close to a crapshoot unless you have an edge. And I really don't think that these people are throwing 400 grand into the market on a whim. I think that they've got a system, or they've just got like such incredibly deep pockets that it doesn't really matter. But unless you have a system or deep pockets or both, like, you should probably stay away from these contracts. And if you're going to play around in options land, just use as far in the future as possible, because those are still going to be pretty reactive. But not like these. They'll change. They'll 5x in a couple of minutes. For sure, through the course of the day, they can 5x. They can 25x through the course of a day. So just imagine if every 100 milliseconds you had a system that was limiting your losses and managing your risk. That's a job. Like, people are paid to manage risk. So like that's what I'm saying. Like I'm extracting these units of value with AI and then trying to like create those into a system. It has not so far yielded what I would like. It hasn't yielded, but what it's yielded is that the direction is sound, and the direction is to, the direction is to use your delta to hedge, not to hedge by price, not to hedge by any indicator other than like delta. For now, in the long term, maybe I'll theta hedge, maybe I'll gamma hedge, like maybe I'll add other indicators to the decision of when to do things. But I think is like a pretty rough estimate and practical start. Using virtual contracts and delta hedging is pretty good. So like last thing, and then we'll end the show. What's really exciting from here is assume I like figure out the threshold logic for the put, and the using and indexing from the previous day's close solves the reactivity problem, which is like a big problem. And I solve the persistence problem as well. And so now I have a reliable system that is only actually active when it has to be. And where that becomes magic is when I really do have a collection of shares that are like even a little bit of gains, because for sure the delta is going to be very slow on those contracts. And I think I actually should always use, that's why I should always actually use this week's expiring chain for the virtual contract. I think so. And that's because I don't want any conflation with extrinsic value. Give me the real freaking value of the contract as it is today. I want that number, like that, or that delta. And so that is going to let me hedge shares, I believe, practically for free. And right now I just have these sold calls kind of like on my shares 24/7. And so when the market goes up, it's good and I make gains or whatever. But I have to compensate by making sure that I have a lot of positive delta to offset the negative delta of my sold call. Problem is that positive delta introduces a new set of risks, and it's way more reactive, which is kind of the point. And also, I have effectively neutralized my hedge in offsetting that. Like, right, I bought the positive delta that offset the negative delta, but that's what I wanted to do. And so what that means, though, is like I actually am not hedged at all if in those scenarios. Again, intentional, because the system, like when you are hedged with a sold call on your shares, you're capped. You're so capped. Like it's such a difference to have unhedged shares. And so what makes all this so much easier is completely exit all positions and use all that equity to build only new positions, right? To only build new positions where like you could almost treat this anyway. There's too much to explain on all of that. Like, let me just come back to the idea of using this week's expiring option chain to be hedging your shares as a virtual contract. And so like if your shares are just purchased, you just bought them, like you want to hedge aggressively. So that's going to work automatically for free, zero logic required. And that's also, I think, part of like the intrinsic usefulness of this system is I'm not making decisions. I'm not reading 50 indicators. I'm not looking at 20 different things. I am just saying, hey, if the probability that this contract is going to expire in the money ever goes down in any day for any reason at any point in time, I immediately want to hedge that. Why do I immediately want to hedge it? Because I'm not hedging otherwise. And so yeah, all of that is sound and to me. And so I then, okay, so then where we actually sell the call and buy the put for the virtual contract, that should be like probably 4 weeks out, maybe 2 to 4 weeks at the highest volume would probably be a good start for that. But either way, now you can just expose yourself to shares all day long. Like that's way less risky than options. And those shares, like, yeah, margin is really expensive right now. It's true. But like, maybe you find a dividend cycling program. Maybe like, I'm not, like, what I'm sure there's a value in people scalping dividends. I'm also sure that like probably half those dividends do get scalped or whatever. Point is, like, you could do stuff with shares. Although I do think that's why options have no fee. Like whenever you sell shares, FINRA takes a cut. I don't think that's exactly the case with options. I don't think there's fees. I think in part because you don't get dividends. And so if you were able to get dividends with options, like that would change, it's impossible. And so I think part of like that fee actually has something to do with like the real benefits of ownership and the cost of ownership as well. But still, I'm sure you could make a profit if you figured it out. Point is, like, you can't go all in on shares with margin and max out your margin every day because like you're going to get margin called. But I think you could with Delta Hedge. I think I'll try it and tell you guys, like, again, why doesn't it work? Tell me why it doesn't work. Like, as soon within a couple of seconds as the trade reversing, it is going to, at the absolute freaking top, so at the perfect time, it will do, I think, a large order of like 5 to 10% of the position that is hedging in terms of a sold call and purchase puts. More on the sold call, but like the puts I think are important as well. More like catastrophic coverage is how I want to test that one out. Like, but either way, it's going to create this credit spread that's like a pincer, and in that you're going to have tons of protection for free, only based off of like it's constantly re-indexing every day. If you're always doing it based off the previous day's close, then it does nothing on days that the market goes up, right? Like, especially if it's a couple of days into the streak, because those virtual contracts are going to have their deltas getting closer and closer to 99. And the deltas will get less reactive the further away from the money they become. And so the more that your price improves, the less chance it's going to misfire a hedge. But what it certainly will do, okay, so then when the market does decline, yeah, it's not going to hedge that because you're at delta 99. I'll have to think of different variants. There's going to be a lot of versions of this, but I know that the first version of just selling calls doesn't really work for a variety of reasons. I think the number one version is my index was wrong, in that, like, well, first of all, it worked, right? Like it sold calls for a credit. I was able to buy back the calls for a profit and keep the difference. Would have been actually the right move to let those calls stay a couple of days for a day like today. But so like in that way, it would have totally worked, but I took the hedge off. Like, I don't know how to protect from that other than I'll get more comfortable with the system because it won't be in test mode. It will be tried and it will be known. And so, and also, like I said, it's a problem to index based off of when you just like start and stop. You need a real index. And I think the best index maybe is a moving average, but I think probably the real best index is the previous day's close. And yeah, I think that'll be the right level of reactivity. So I'll keep testing and let you guys know. But unfortunately, like, it didn't protect my returns, but I learned a lot, and it generated a ton of credits. Like, yeah, it generated a ton of credits. But I use those credits to buy naked calls, which is what you're doing when you're buying. Now, I bought them for half off, but you're still buying something that's gapping down every day for half off. Doesn't really matter. And so, like, I kind of knew that doing it, but like, the more I think about it, the more I think like, okay, that's really why it didn't work, is because I took off the hedge. But then why did I take off the hedge? Because I had a bunch of little bombs, so I wasn't hedging with with great contracts. That'll be one element to fix. But also, I think I'll be a lot more inclined to keep those hedges around if it is meaningfully less than my previous day's close, because that's psychologically totally different than just like, oh, this random index when I hit a button during a random day. That's like, no, this is like part of a cycle, and it's iterative, and at the end of every day it's calculated, and so like it just seems like that's a better method to me. But like, yeah, if I buy back my hedge, I don't actually know. This solves it. Okay, suppose I buy back my hedge and I take those profits, and the next cycle of delta hedge is going to see that the previous day's close and the gap has returned, albeit smaller or even greater. No, it would have returned greater, because if I made a profit, that means the price went down. So now the hedge is even greater. And so I know it will just repurchase that hedge again. And so what would I do? I don't know. Maybe instead of just like, when do you exit those? I think you only exit your shorts when your longs. I don't even know if you could do it rules based. You have to do it manually. There's a lot to learn and think about here, but the concept of using delta hedging to take on more risk than basically anyone could ever manage, to me, is a sound principle. It's rooted in math and logic and how the dynamics of options are calculated and priced. And so it should be, in the fullness of time, perfectly possible to build a put that puts itself, and then you guys can buy it for a good chunk of money. I think that's worth what, a couple $100 a month, something like that. But $69.99 for early subs. And so, yeah, I'd love to get some feedback on the ideas, and I'll keep testing and return and report. See you guys.